The rain hit the pavement like shattered glass, and Keira Farrow sprinted across the cobblestone square with her laptop bag clutched against her chest, cursing herself for ignoring the weather alerts. The old university district was a maze of stone buildings that all looked identical in the dark, and she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere near the theology college. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Gothic spires and gargoyles that seemed to leer down at her drenched form. Thunder followed immediately, a crack so loud it felt like the world was breaking open. She needed shelter now, before her research notes dissolved into pulp and her laptop drowned. A building loomed ahead, tall windows glowing with warm amber light. The heavy oak door stood slightly ajar, an invitation she didn't have time to question. Keira pushed through, stumbling into an entrance hall that smelled of old leather, parchment, and something darker she couldn't identify. Rain streamed from her coat onto marble floors, veined with gold. She stood there shivering, waiting for someone to appear and demand what she was doing there. But no one came. The silence was profound, broken only by the muffled fury of the storm outside. She ventured deeper, following the amber glow through an archway into a library that stole the breath from her lungs. It was the most beautiful room she had ever seen. Shelves rose 3 stories high, circling a central space filled with reading chairs upholstered in burgundy velvet. A fireplace dominated one wall, flames dancing behind ornate ironwork. Every surface gleamed with care-polished wood, gleaming brass, books arranged with meticulous precision. First editions, she realized, her historian's heart beginning to race. The spines she could see dated back centuries, some in languages she recognized and others she didn't. Keira knew she shouldn't be here. This wasn't a public library or even a university collection. This was someone's private sanctuary, and she was trespassing. But the storm showed no signs of stopping, and she was soaked through, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Just until the worst passes, she told herself. Then I'll leave. She peeled off her wet coat, draping it over the back of a chair near the fire. Her jeans were damp, but her sweater was mostly dry. The heat from the fireplace drew her closer, and she sank into one of the velvet chairs, meaning to wait just a few minutes. The chair embraced her like a living thing, perfectly molded to her body. Her eyes drifted to the nearest shelf, reading titles in Latin, Greek, what looked like Old Norse. Her muscles began to unknot. The adrenaline of her panicked run drained away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She'd been working 18-hour days for the past month, trying to finish her dissertation on medieval manuscript preservation. The text blurred before her eyes. Just a moment, she thought. Just a moment to rest. Keira's eyes closed, and sleep claimed her between one breath and the next. Theron Tenebraith returned to his residence at 3 a.m, tired from a council session that had accomplished nothing except confirming that vampires could argue in circles for hours without reaching any conclusion. The storm was still raging, which suited his mood perfectly. He'd left the door unlatched deliberately, a small rebellion against the endless security protocols his advisors insisted upon. Let the storm in. Let something wild and uncontrolled disturb the careful order of his existence. He smelled her before he saw her, the scent of rain and human warmth, utterly out of place in his domain. Theron went completely still in the entrance hall, every predatory instinct sharpening. Someone was in his library, someone alive, breathing, heart beating a steady rhythm he could hear from where he stood. He moved silently through the archway and stopped. A woman was asleep in his chair, curled into the velvet like a cat. Her wet coat hung nearby, steaming slightly in the fireplace's heat. Dark hair fell across her face, and her hands were tucked under her cheek in an unconsciously vulnerable gesture that did something strange to his chest. She was perhaps 25 or 26, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, and she looked utterly exhausted even in sleep. The logical response was to wake her and send her away. His residence was not a shelter for wayward humans. The council would be horrified if they knew someone had breached his private space, and there were protocols, always protocols, about contact with humans who didn't know what he was. Theron crossed to where she slept, intending to do exactly that, but when he looked down at her face, something stopped him. She looked peaceful, he thought. When was the last time he'd seen that kind of unguarded peace? When was the last time he'd felt it himself? The sky outside was already showing the first gray hints of approaching dawn. He couldn't send her out into the storm now, not when sunrise was coming. The rationalization was thin, and he knew it, but he didn't examine it too closely. Instead, he moved to the windows and drew the heavy blackout curtains, sealing out the coming daylight. The library fell into deeper shadow, lit only by the dying fire. He should leave. Go to his rooms and let her wake on her own, confused but safe. But Theron found himself settling into the chair opposite hers, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. Curious for the first time in decades, who was she? What had brought her here, to his door, on this particular night? Why did she sleep like someone who hadn't rested properly in weeks? The questions turned in his mind as the hours passed. He didn't move from the chair. He simply watched and guarded and wondered at himself for both. When Keira woke, sunlight no, firelight was painting golden patterns on the ceiling, and she had no idea where she was. The memory returned in a rush. The storm, the unlocked door, the most beautiful library in the world. She'd fallen asleep. She'd broken into someone's private library and fallen asleep in their furniture like some kind of disaster-prone fairy tale character. She sat up too quickly, and her laptop bag tumbled off her lap onto the floor with a thud that echoed through the silent room. The curtains were drawn now, she realized. They'd been open when she arrived, which meant someone had been here. Someone had found her sleeping, and instead of calling the police or waking her up, they'd closed the curtains and let her sleep. "Good morning," said a voice like dark honey, and Keira nearly jumped out of her skin. He was sitting in the chair across from hers, and she had no idea how she'd missed him. The man was impossible to miss. He looked like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, white hair that fell to his shoulders, skin pale as marble, features so perfect they didn't look quite real. He wore black-on-black tailored clothes that probably cost more than her entire graduate student wardrobe. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, silver gray, and utterly focused on her face. "I'm so sorry," Keira stammered, her face burning. "The door was open, and the storm was so bad, and I just meant to wait it out, not fall asleep in your furniture like some kind of vagrant. I'll leave right now, I'm so sorry." "The storm opened the door," he said calmly. "You sought shelter. There's nothing to apologize for. Though I admit I'm curious how you found this place. It's not marked on any map." His accent was subtle, but definitely there. British, perhaps, or something older she couldn't place. He didn't seem angry, which was something. He seemed amused, if anything, which was almost worse. "I got lost," Keira admitted. "I'm doing research at the university, and I took a wrong turn in the rain. I really didn't mean to intrude. This is your home, isn't it? Your collection?" "It is." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "And what kind of research brings you out into thunderstorms?" "Medieval manuscripts, preservation techniques, authentication methods, that sort of thing." She was babbling now, nerves making her words tumble over each other. "I'm working on my dissertation, which you definitely don't care about. I should go." "I'm interested in manuscripts myself," he said, and there was something warm in his voice that made her pause halfway to standing. "Please, don't rush off on my account. The storm hasn't fully cleared, and you look like you could use coffee. Do you drink coffee?" Keira blinked at him. "I'm basically made of coffee at this point." The smile that crossed his face was devastating, transforming him from impossibly beautiful to genuinely warm. "Then allow me to make you a cup, as an apology for my residence luring you in under false pretenses. I'm Theron, by the way. Theron Tenebraith." "Keira Farrow." She felt like she was in some kind of dream, standing in this impossible library while this impossible man offered her coffee. "You really don't have to. I insist, and perhaps you'll tell me more about your research. It's been a long time since I've had someone to discuss manuscripts with." He rose from the chair, moving with a grace that was almost inhuman, and gestured for her to follow. Keira grabbed her laptop bag and trailed after him, still half convinced she was hallucinating. The library opened into a sitting room, smaller but no less elegant, with a kitchen area tucked into one corner. Theron moved around it with practiced ease, pulling out an espresso machine that looked like it belonged in an Italian cafe. "How do you take it?" he asked. Black is fine. I'm not picky." Keira hovered near the doorway, unsure if she should sit or stand or possibly just flee before this got any weirder. "This is a really incredible collection. How long have you been building it?" "A very long time," Theron said, his back to her as he worked. Centuries, actually. It started as a personal interest and grew into something of an obsession. Most of the books here are first editions, some of them the only surviving copies of their texts. Centuries. He had to be exaggerating or speaking metaphorically. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled, filling the room with the rich scent of coffee. Theron turned, offering her a cup in delicate porcelain that probably cost more than her monthly stipend. "Thank you," Keira said, accepting it carefully. The coffee was perfect, dark and strong without being bitter. "This is amazing. Both the coffee and the collection. I saw some of the spines on the shelves. Are those really 14th century manuscripts?" Some are older." He leaned against the counter, cradling his own cup, watching her with that same focused intensity. "Would you like to see them? Properly, I mean, not just while hiding from a storm." Every instinct she had for self-preservation said to politely decline and get out before she did something stupid, like falling in love with a library that didn't belong to her. But Keira had never been good at listening to self-preservation instincts, especially when manuscripts were involved. "I would love that," she said honestly. "If you're sure you don't mind. I know this is private." "I'm sure." Theron's smile was genuine, reaching those impossible gray eyes. "It would be a pleasure to share it with someone who understands what she's looking at. Most people see old books. You see history." He wasn't wrong, and that was how Keira Farrow found herself returning the next evening, and the next, and the one after that, pulled back to Theron's library like a moth to flame. They fell into a pattern over the following weeks. Keira would finish her day at the university library and make her way to the unmarked building in the old district. Theron would be waiting, usually in the same chair where she'd first seen him, and they would spend hours among the manuscripts. He showed her treasures she'd only read about in footnotes, illuminated gospels, astronomical treatises, poetry, and dead languages. They cataloged and discussed and argued about dating methods and provenance. Theron was brilliant, she discovered. Not just knowledgeable, but genuinely passionate about the history contained in these pages. He spoke about medieval scribes like he'd known them personally, with an intimacy that made her laugh and call him a romantic. He never corrected her. He was also, she began to realize, probably not human. The signs accumulated slowly. The way he never ate or drank anything except occasional wine that looked suspiciously dark. The fact that she only ever saw him after sunset, and he always left before dawn. The impossible perfection of his features, the unnatural grace, the way his eyes sometimes caught the light like an animal's. The old-fashioned way he spoke about certain things, slipping into phrasing that belonged to another century. Keira knew she should be afraid. Instead, she found herself fascinated. Whatever Theron was, he'd been nothing but kind to her. Patient with her questions, generous with his knowledge, genuinely interested in her opinions. He listened when she talked about her research like it mattered, like she mattered. And somewhere in those long nights surrounded by history, she started to fall. It was a slow, inevitable descent, like slipping into warm water. The way his face lit up when he found a reference she'd been searching for. The sound of his laugh, rare but genuine, when she made an unexpected joke. The careful way he handled the manuscripts, like they were living things that deserved respect. The night he'd insisted she take his chair by the fire because hers had a draft, and the small smile he'd worn when she'd curled into it like she belonged there. 3 weeks after the night of the storm, Keira arrived to find Theron pacing the library with tension radiating from every line of his body. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. He stopped, turning to face her. For the first time since they'd met, he looked uncertain. "There's something I need to tell you, about this collection, and about me. You deserve to know what you've become involved in." Keira set down her bag slowly. "Okay. The books here aren't just valuable," Theron said. "They're dangerous. This library contains the last uncensored histories of my people vampires, Keira. I'm a vampire, and I've been one for nearly 400 years. These books document things that others want forgotten. Atrocities committed, truths suppressed, powers challenged. There's a faction within vampire society that wants this archive destroyed, and they've recently discovered its location." The word vampire hung in the air between them. Kira's mind raced, fitting together all the small pieces she'd noticed and ignored. It made perfect sense. It should have terrified her. "How much danger are you in?" she asked. Theron blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Keira, did you hear what I said? You're a vampire. This library is full of suppressed vampire history, and someone wants to burn it down." She crossed the space between them, looking up into his surprised face. "I heard you. How much danger are you in? And don't you dare lie to me." Something shifted in his expression, warmth flooding in where uncertainty had been. "Considerable danger. The Purge faction doesn't make empty threats. They've already sent warnings. If I don't surrender the collection for destruction, they'll come and take it by force, probably kill me in the process to make an example. Then we need to protect it," Keira said firmly. "You can't let them destroy 400 years of history. These are primary sources, Theron, irreplaceable records. What do you need? Better security? A way to copy the texts? I need you to understand that this isn't your fight." Theron reached out, his hand hovering near her face before dropping. "You're human. You have a life, a future, a brilliant career ahead of you. Getting involved in vampire politics could get you killed, and I will not be responsible for that." "Too late. I'm already involved." Keira caught his hand, holding it between both of hers. His skin was cool but not cold, and she felt the slight tremor that ran through him at the contact. "You showed me this collection. You trusted me with it. That makes it my responsibility, too. Besides, I'm a historian. Preserving important texts is literally what I'm training to do." "Keira," her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "You don't know what you're offering." "Then tell me. Explain the situation, all of it, and let me decide. Don't shut me out because you think you're protecting me." For a long moment, Theron just looked at her, his gray eyes searching her face. Then he sighed, a very human gesture, and gently squeezed her hands before releasing them. "The Purge faction believes that vampires should remain in the shadows," he said. "They want to erase any record that might expose us to human scrutiny or show us in an unfavorable light. This library contains evidence of vampire involvement in human wars, in historical atrocities, in political manipulation. It also contains beautiful things, poetry, philosophy, scientific discoveries that were suppressed because they came from creatures humans fear. If the faction destroys it, entire chapters of history disappear. But if I defend it by force, if I fight them openly, I prove exactly what humans fear about us, that we're violent, dangerous, willing to kill to protect our secrets." "What if you didn't have to fight?" Keira asked slowly, an idea forming. "What if the archive wasn't a secret anymore? If it was public knowledge, documented and distributed, they couldn't quietly destroy it. They'd have to destroy every copy, every digital file, every academic institution that had the records." Theron's eyes widened. "You want to publish it? Release it into the human academic world?" "Why not? I have connections at the university, access to the Digital Humanities Lab. We could photograph the manuscripts, create high-resolution scans, catalog everything properly. Once it's in the academic record, it becomes part of human scholarship. The Purge faction loses their power to erase it." "It would expose my people," Theron said quietly. "Prove that vampires exist. The Council would never approve. I'd be going against centuries of secrecy laws." "But you'd save the history," Keira pressed. "Isn't that what matters? The truth deserves to exist, even if it's uncomfortable. Maybe especially if it's uncomfortable." Theron began to pace again, and she could practically see his mind working through the implications. The backlash would be tremendous, from both sides. Vampires would see it as betrayal. Humans would react with fear, possibly violence. The Council might execute me for breaking the silence. Or they might not. Keira followed him across the room. "If you frame it right, as a preservation effort, as opening dialogue instead of maintaining dangerous secrets, you're a king, aren't you? That's what the Council members call you. Use that authority." "I was a king once, in the old sense. Now I'm just a figurehead who sits through endless meetings." But there was something shifting in his voice, hope or determination or both. This would be a massive undertaking, hundreds of manuscripts, multiple languages, proper academic contextualization needed. It would take months. Then we'd better start now, Keira said, before the Purge faction makes their move. Theron stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her, with an expression that made her breath catch. Why are you doing this? You could walk away right now, go back to your safe, normal life. Why risk everything for books that aren't yours, for a vampire you barely know? Because the books matter, Keira said, and because I know you better than you think. You've spent 400 years guarding these histories, keeping them safe when everyone else wanted them destroyed. That's not the action of a monster. That's dedication and integrity and love. So yes, I'm risking things, but I'm also standing beside someone I trust, protecting something irreplaceable. That feels worth it. The silence that followed was profound. Then Theron closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. You are extraordinary, he said softly, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you don't regret this. I won't, Keira whispered. I couldn't. He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of restrained intensity, and Keira felt the world tilt on its axis. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder than necessary, Theron rested his forehead against hers. I think I'm falling in love with you, he admitted, which is possibly the worst timing in history, given that we're about to start a war with vampire conservatives. Keira laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. I think I'm falling in love with you too, and you're right, the timing is terrible. But we'll handle it. Together? Together. They started that very night. Keira brought her laptop and camera equipment from the university, and Theron cleared a work table for their operations. They developed a system. He would select manuscripts, handling the delicate pages with practiced care, while she photographed and cataloged each one. Between them, they worked out translations for the texts in languages she didn't know, creating annotations that would make the contents accessible to human scholars. The work was painstaking and intimate. They spent hours side by side, their shoulders brushing, their voices low in the quiet library. Theron told her stories about the manuscript's origins, about the vampires who had written them, or the events they described. Some were beautiful love poems written across centuries, scientific observations that had been ahead of their time. Others were dark confessions of violence, records of human lives destroyed or manipulated, proof that vampires had not always been kind to the species they lived among. This is why they want it destroyed, Theron said one night, holding a journal that documented a vampire's involvement in 17th century witch trials. We weren't the victims here. We instigated hunts, accused innocent humans to divert suspicion from ourselves. It's not a proud history. But it's still history, Keira said gently, and hiding it doesn't make it go away. If anything, acknowledging it is the first step to doing better. He looked at her with such raw affection that her heart ached. How did I exist for 400 years without you? Probably very boringly, she teased, and he laughed, the sound warming the entire room. But as the days passed and their archive grew, so did the danger. Theron received more warnings, each one less subtle than the last. Messages left at his door, threats delivered through old vampire channels, rumors that the Purge faction was preparing for a direct assault. The tension wound tighter and tighter. 2 months into their project, Theron's worst fears materialized. Keira arrived one evening to find him standing in the library surrounded by 5 other vampires, all with the same white hair and pale skin, all radiating cold authority. The Purge faction had come. "Keira, leave!" Theron said immediately, not taking his eyes off the intruders. "Now." "No," she stepped into the room, her heart hammering but her voice steady. "This is as much my project as yours." The vampire at the center of the group, a woman with ice-blue eyes and an expression like carved stone, turned her attention to Keira. "The human speaks? How charming. Tell me, little scholar, do you understand what your vampire king is doing? He's preparing to shatter the silence that has protected our kind for millennia." "He's preserving history that you want to erase?" Keira shot back. "That's not the same thing." "It amounts to betrayal." The woman's voice was arctic. "King Theron, you have until sunrise to surrender the archive for destruction. If you refuse, we will take it by force and execute you for treason against vampire law. Choose wisely." I'm not surrendering anything, Theron said calmly, though Keira could see the tension in every line of his body. This collection stays intact. Then you choose death, the woman gestured, and the other vampires moved forward. Stop. Kira's voice rang out across the library, and to her shock, they actually paused. She pulled out her phone, holding it up so they could see the screen. You're too late. The archive is already published. I uploaded the last batch of files 3 hours ago. Every major university database, every historical society, every digital humanities repository I could access. The manuscripts are out there now, documented and distributed. Destroying this library won't accomplish anything except proving you're willing to murder for censorship. The silence was absolute. The Purge faction vampires stared at her, then at Theron, who looked equally stunned. You published it? He asked. When? This afternoon. I knew they were coming. You've been too tense, too watchful. So I finished the last batch early and sent everything out. Keira kept her phone up, her hand remarkably steady despite her racing pulse. It's done. The history is preserved. You can kill us if you want, but it won't change anything. The faction leader's face twisted with fury. You foolish child. You've exposed us all. Humans will know we exist. The panic, the violence, the hunting that will follow that blood is on your hands. Maybe, Keira acknowledged, or maybe humans will surprise you. Maybe they'll be interested instead of terrified. Maybe opening dialogue is better than hiding in shadows and erasing inconvenient truths. But either way, you don't get to destroy the archive. That part is over. Theron moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and protective. She's right. The silence was already cracking. Humans have cameras everywhere, social media, instant communication. How much longer did you think we could hide? At least this way, the revelation comes with context, with history, with proof that we're more than the monsters in their stories. We're scholars and artists, and yes, sometimes terrible things. Just like they are. The faction leader looked between them, her expression murderous. For a long, terrible moment, Keira thought she might attack anyway, consequences be damned. Then she hissed something in a language Keira didn't recognize and turned sharply. The council will hear of this, she spat. Both of you, this isn't finished. I look forward to it, Theron said coolly. Tell them King Theron Tenebraith takes full responsibility for the decision. The human was acting on my orders. Like hell I was, Keira interjected. I made this choice myself. If the council has a problem, they can talk to me directly. The faction leader's lip curled. Then she swept from the library, her followers trailing behind her like shadows. The door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. As soon as they were alone, Theron turned to Keira, his hands gripping her shoulders. That was the most reckless, brilliant, terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Are you all right? I'm fine. Shaking, but fine. Keira let out a breathless laugh. Did that actually work? Did we win? I think we did. Theron pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel the unnecessary tension in his body. You saved the archive. You saved me. God, Keira, when you stood up to them, I thought my heart would stop. If I had a functional heart. You do, she said, wrapping her arms around his waist. It works just fine, just differently. I could hear it in your voice. He pulled back enough to look at her face, and the expression in his eyes was raw with emotion. I love you. I know the timing is still terrible, and we're probably going to face the council's wrath, and this is all complicated beyond belief. But I love you. I think I started falling that first night, when you slept in my chair like you belonged there. I love you too. Keira reached up to touch his face, tracing the sharp line of his cheekbone. And I don't care about the timing or the complications. This us, the archive, fighting for what matters, this feels right. Theron kissed her again, deeper this time, with none of the careful restraint from before. Keira kissed back just as fiercely, pouring everything she felt into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. So what happens now, she asked. Now we prepare for the council, Theron said. They'll summon us within the week. We'll need to present a defense, explain our actions, convince them that what we did was necessary rather than treasonous. Can we win that argument? Honestly, I don't know, but I know we're going to try. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture tender. There's something else you should know. If the council finds in our favor, if they accept what we've done, you'll be in danger from other vampires who disagree. You'll need protection, the kind that lasts longer than a human lifetime." Keira understood what he was offering. "You're talking about turning me. I'm saying it's an option, not an obligation, not a demand. But if you wanted it, if you wanted to stay with me and continue guarding the archive and have the time to see how this all plays out, I would give you that. I would give you eternity if you asked for it." The enormity of the offer settled over her. Becoming a vampire, giving up daylight, human food, the normal life she'd always assumed she'd have, gaining centuries instead of decades, the ability to protect the collection she'd helped save, a future beside the man she loved. "I need to think about it," Keira said slowly. "Not because I don't want to be with you, but because this is huge, and I want to make the decision with a clear head, not in the aftermath of nearly dying." "Of course." Theron's smile was understanding. "Take all the time you need. Whatever you decide, I'm here." The council summons came 5 days later, delivered on heavy parchment with a blood-red seal. Keira read the formal language with a historian's eye, noting the careful phrasing that managed to be both polite and threatening. "They want both of us," she observed. "At the Conclave Hall, 3 nights from now. Do I need to prepare testimony or something?" "Just tell the truth," Theron advised. "They'll respect honesty more than political maneuvering. Though I should warn you, the council chamber is designed to be intimidating. Don't let it throw you." He wasn't exaggerating. The Conclave Hall was buried beneath the city in a series of limestone caverns that had been converted into something between a throne room and a cathedral. 7 chairs faced them, each occupied by a vampire who radiated ancient power. The Purge faction leader was there too, standing off to the side with her followers, her expression triumphant. Theron and Keira stood in the center of the chamber, facing judgment. He was wearing formal clothes now, black velvet and silver that made him look every inch the king he'd once been. Keira had dressed in her best professional outfit, trying to channel competent academic rather than terrified human. The vampire in the central chair spoke first, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Theron Tenebraith, you stand accused of breaking the silence, of exposing our kind to human knowledge without council approval, and of placing vampire society at risk. How do you answer these charges?" "Guilty on all counts," Theron said calmly. "And I would do it again." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled vampires. The council member leaned forward. "You admit your treason?" "I admit to prioritizing truth over secrecy, and preservation over destruction. The silence was never meant to enable censorship. It was meant to protect us from persecution. But times have changed. Humans have changed. Maintaining absolute secrecy was becoming impossible, and doing so at the cost of our own history was unconscionable." "The human was involved," another council member said, gesturing toward Keira. "Did you compel her? Force her participation?" "No," Keira spoke up before Theron could answer. "He didn't compel me. I chose to help because I'm a historian, and the idea of destroying irreplaceable manuscripts made me sick. Whatever consequences come from publication, I accept them. But I won't apologize for preserving history." The Purge faction leader stepped forward. "The consequences are already beginning. Human media is covering the archives, calling them an elaborate hoax but investigating nonetheless. Questions are being asked. Our security is compromised." "Our security was always going to be compromised eventually," Theron countered. "Technology makes hiding impossible. At least this way, we control the narrative. We present ourselves as we actually are, complex beings with a rich history, rather than letting humans discover us through some viral video of a feeding gone wrong." "And you think humans will simply accept us?" The faction leader's voice dripped with scorn. "That they won't hunt us, study us, try to destroy what they fear?" "Some will," Keira admitted. "Some will react exactly as you predict. But others will be curious, will want to learn, will see the potential for coexistence. You're not giving humanity enough credit. We're capable of growth and understanding, not just fear and violence." The council members conferred among themselves in low voices. Keira tried not to fidget, tried to project calm confidence while her insides churned with anxiety. Theron's hand found hers, squeezing gently. The small gesture steadied her. Finally, the central council member spoke again. "The council has reached a decision. Theron Tenebraith, your actions were unauthorized and reckless. However, they were also born of genuine conviction and have accomplished something we cannot ignore: the preservation of our cultural heritage. The Purge faction's desire to destroy our own history has long troubled certain members of this council. The faction leader made an angry noise, but the council member continued. We therefore offer a compromise. The archive remains public. There will be no further attempts to destroy or suppress it. In exchange, Theron will take responsibility for managing human-vampire relations as this new reality unfolds. You will serve as ambassador, translator, and mediator. You will help both species navigate this revelation. Theron bowed his head. I accept. As for the human, the council member's gaze shifted to Keira. You have proven yourself both brave and principled. You are granted the council's protection from any vampire who might seek revenge for your role in these events. Should you choose to remain among us, you will be welcome. Thank you, Keira managed, relief flooding through her. The judgment was concluded. As they left the conclave hall, climbing back toward the surface world, Theron pulled Keira into an alcove and kissed her soundly. We did it, he said against her lips. We actually did it. We're also about to be incredibly busy, Keira pointed out, laughing. Managing human-vampire relations, that's going to be a full-time job. Several full-time jobs, Theron agreed, which brings me back to my earlier offer. I know you said you needed time to think, and that hasn't changed. But if you're going to be working alongside me on this, if you're going to help build bridges between species, having more than a human lifespan would be useful. Not necessary, but useful. Keira looked at him, at this impossibly beautiful vampire who had guarded her while she slept, who had shared his most precious possessions with her, who had fought beside her to preserve truth even when it was dangerous. She thought about the work ahead, the potential to shape how two species learn to coexist. She thought about the archive, the ongoing preservation and study it would need. She thought about having centuries instead of decades to explore, to learn, to love. Yes, she said. I want it. I want to be turned. I want to stay with you. I want all of it. Theron's expression transformed into pure joy. Are you certain? There's no going back once it's done. I'm certain, though I have one condition. Anything. I want to see one more sunrise first, and I want you there with me, before the change. His eyes softened. That can be arranged tomorrow morning. I know the perfect place. They spent the rest of that night making preparations. Theron explained the turning process, clinical and thorough, making sure she understood what would happen. It would hurt, he warned. The transformation was violent, her body fundamentally remaking itself, but he would be there the entire time, and when she woke, she would be stronger, faster, functionally immortal. Will I still be me? Keira asked quietly. You'll still be you, Theron promised. Your personality, your memories, your passion for history, all of that stays. You'll just have sharper senses and new dietary requirements. No more coffee, Keira mourned. That might be the hardest part. He laughed. We can find you a suitable replacement. Blood can be quite pleasant once you adjust. As dawn approached, Theron led her to the roof of his building. The old university city spread out below them, spires and domes catching the first light. The sky was beginning to pale in the east, gray giving way to pink and gold. The sun won't kill me instantly, Theron explained, standing close behind her. I can manage a few minutes before the burn becomes dangerous, long enough to watch with you. They stood together as the sun rose, painting the world in shades of fire. Keira leaned back against Theron's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and committed every detail to memory. The way the light touched the old stone buildings, the warmth on her face, the absolute peace of the moment. Beautiful, she whispered. Yes, Theron agreed, but he was looking at her instead of the sunrise. When the light became too intense, they retreated inside. Theron's hands were already showing faint burns, the pale skin reddening. He healed quickly, she noticed. Within minutes, the damage had faded. Ready? He asked. Keira nodded. Ready? The turning happened in his private chambers, a room she'd never seen before. Theron had her lie on the bed, her head on soft pillows, and he stretched out beside her. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on her. This was trust in its purest form. I'll make it as quick as I can, he promised. But you need to drink from me as well. That's what completes the change. Do you understand? I understand. He bent to her throat, and there was a moment of sharp pain as his fangs pierced skin. Then warmth flooded through her, pleasure mixing with the pain in a dizzying rush. She felt her blood flowing out, felt herself weakening, and just as panic began to rise, Theron pulled back. He bit his own wrist, deep enough that dark blood welled up, and pressed it to her lips. Drink, Keira. Trust me. She drank. The blood was strange, metallic and sweet at once, but as it hit her system, everything changed. Power flooded her veins like electricity. Her heart stuttered, stopped, then began beating in a new rhythm. Every nerve in her body lit up with sensation that walked the line between agony and ecstasy. Theron held her through it all, murmuring reassurances, anchoring her to reality as her body transformed. Time lost meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. Finally, the intensity faded, leaving her gasping and transformed. Keira opened her eyes and the world was different, sharper, brighter, more. She could hear Theron's heartbeat, slow and steady. She could smell the old paper from the library 3 rooms away. When she moved, it was with a grace she'd never possessed as a human. How do you feel? Theron asked softly. Incredible, Keira breathed. Everything is so vivid. Is it always like this? You'll adjust. The intensity fades to something more manageable. He smiled, relief evident on his face. Welcome to immortality, my love. She kissed him, tasting herself and him and the strange new reality of what they'd become together. When they finally pulled apart, she was grinning. So what now? Do I need to learn to turn into a bat or something? Theron laughed, the sound rich and genuine. That's a myth, but I can teach you to move properly, to manage the bloodthirst, to navigate vampire society. We have time, all the time in the world. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. The publication of the Vampire Archives sent shockwaves through both human and vampire worlds, exactly as predicted. But rather than outright panic, the reaction was complex. Scholars were fascinated. Governments were cautious but willing to negotiate. There were incidents, of course, hate crimes against vampires who revealed themselves, vampire attacks on humans who reacted with violence, but there were also moments of genuine bridge building. Theron and Keira became the faces of this new detente. They gave interviews, organized conferences, facilitated meetings between human officials and vampire leaders. Keira's academic background proved invaluable in framing the archives in accessible ways, while Theron's centuries of experience navigated the complex politics involved. The archive itself became an official institution, housed in a new building designed to accommodate both day-walking humans and night-preferring vampires. It opened with great ceremony exactly 1 year after the night Keira had first stumbled into Theron's library. The opening ceremony was held in the late afternoon, that golden hour when both species could comfortably attend. The building was magnificent, all glass and steel, and carefully controlled lighting, with the original manuscripts displayed in climate-controlled cases. Dignitaries from around the world had come to witness this moment, this unprecedented cooperation between species. Keira stood at the front of the ceremony hall beside Theron, looking out at the assembled crowd. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the sky beginning its slow transition toward evening. In a few hours, she would need to retreat from the daylight she'd once taken for granted. But she'd made her peace with that trade. What she'd gained was worth what she'd given up. You're going to miss it, Theron murmured beside her, following her gaze to the windows. The sunlight. Sometimes, Keira admitted, but I remember that last sunrise. I remember it perfectly, every detail. And I'd rather have the archive preserved, the history protected, a future with you than 1,000 more sunrises. I'm going to hold you to that on difficult days, he teased gently. Please do. The ceremony began. Speeches were made, official declarations signed, photographs taken. When it was their turn to speak, Theron and Keira stood together at the podium. A year ago, Theron began, his voice carrying easily through the space. This archive existed in secret, guarded but hidden, preserved but suppressed. One human woman stumbled into my library during a storm and changed everything. Keira picked up the thread. History belongs to everyone. Not just the powerful, not just the victors, but everyone who is touched by its consequences. This archive represents centuries of vampire culture, the beautiful and the terrible, the inspiring and the shameful. Making it public wasn't about exposing vampires. It was about honoring truth. The road ahead won't be easy, Theron continued. Two species learning to coexist after centuries of secrecy and fear is complicated. There will be setbacks, conflicts, moments when it seems impossible. But this archive stands as proof that we can find common ground. That preservation matters more than censorship. That understanding is worth the risk. Keira smiled out at the audience. So welcome. Welcome to the archive of vampire history. Welcome to a new chapter in both our species' stories. Welcome to the truth. The applause was genuine and sustained. As they left the podium, Theron's hand found Keira's, squeezing gently. They walked together through the archive's main hall, past the manuscripts they'd cataloged together, past the photographs documenting their months of work. Later, after the ceremony had ended and the dignitaries had departed, Keira and Theron stood alone in the library's reading room. It was designed to echo Theron's original library, the same burgundy chairs, the same warm lighting, the same sense of sanctuary. "Do you ever regret it?" Keira asked, settling into one of the chairs. "Giving up the secrecy, the quiet life you had before?" Theron sat across from her, in the same position he'd occupied that first morning when she'd woken in his library. "Not for a moment. That quiet life was also a lonely one. I had the books, but no one to share them with. Now I have you, and a purpose that matters, and the possibility of real change. I'd trade 1,000 years of peace for 1 year like the one we've just had." "Good answer," Keira grinned at him. "Though I should warn you, I'm planning to be around for considerably more than 1 year." "I'm counting on it." Theron's expression turned serious. "Keira, do you remember what I told you the night you drank my blood? That I'd been falling in love with you since you first slept in my chair?" "I remember. I need you to know that hasn't changed. If anything, it's deepened. You're my partner, my co-conspirator, the person who makes immortality feel like a gift instead of a burden. I love you more than I thought possible for someone who's lived as long as I have." Keira's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too. You gave me purpose and adventure and a chance to make a real difference. You also gave me eternity to do it all in, which is honestly the best gift I've ever received. Besides my impeccable coffee-making skills." "Well, obviously those were the main draw," she teased. "The eternal love is just a nice bonus." Theron laughed and crossed to her chair, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Come here, you impossible woman." They kissed in the quiet library, surrounded by the history they'd fought to preserve, the future they were building together. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Inside, two immortals held each other and planned for centuries to come. The archive thrived in the months and years that followed. It became a center for vampire-human scholarship, a neutral ground where both species could learn from each other. Keira oversaw the academic programs, while Theron managed the political complexities, and together they navigated the challenges of building bridges across ancient divides. They had their difficult moments, of course. Vampire traditionalists who resented the exposure, human extremists who wanted all vampires destroyed, political crises that threatened the fragile peace they'd established. But through it all, Keira and Theron stood together, united in their conviction that truth and understanding were worth fighting for. 10 years after that first storm-swept night, Keira stood in the archive's main reading room and smiled at the sight before her. Human and vampire scholars working side by side, studying manuscripts that had nearly been destroyed, students of both species learning each other's histories, asking questions, finding common ground. Theron materialized beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Satisfied with our work?" "Deeply," Keira said, leaning into him, "though I reserve the right to keep being ambitious about expanding the collection. I wouldn't expect anything less." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Did I ever thank you properly for falling asleep in my library that night?" "A few thousand times, but I'm always open to hearing it again." "Thank you," Theron said seriously, "for trusting me, for seeing past what I was to who I am, for fighting beside me to preserve something that mattered, for giving up the sunlight to stay with me, for making these centuries ahead feel like a beginning instead of just more time." Keira turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face. Thank you for guarding me till dawn, for sharing your treasures with me, for believing that I could handle the truth, for giving me a purpose worth an immortal lifetime, for loving me exactly as I am. Always, Theron promised. For as long as time exists. They kissed in the library they'd built together, surrounded by the history they'd saved and the future they were creating. Outside, the world was changing, two species learning to coexist in ways that would have seemed impossible a decade before. But inside this sanctuary of books and truth and carefully preserved knowledge, everything was exactly as it should be. Keira pulled back from the kiss, a thought occurring to her. You know what I just realized? We never did figure out why your door was open that night. You said the storm opened it, but that building has heavy oak doors. Wind alone wouldn't have done it. Theron's expression turned mysterious, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Didn't it? Theron, did you leave that door open on purpose? I was feeling reckless that night, he admitted, tired of councils and protocols and the same careful existence I'd been living for centuries. So I left the door unlatched and thought, let's see what happens. Let something wild and unexpected into my ordered life. And you got a soaking wet graduate student who fell asleep in your favorite chair. I got you, Theron corrected, his voice warm with affection. Best reckless decision I ever made. Keira laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet library. So this entire thing, the archive going public, vampire-human relations. Why me becoming immortal, all of it started because you were bored one night. Started because I was ready for change without knowing it, Theron said, and because you were brave enough to walk through an unlocked door during a storm. The rest was just us being brilliant together. I can live with that origin story. Good, because you're stuck with it for eternity. They stood together in their library, in their archive, in the life they'd built from a chance encounter and a shared love of history. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but what they'd created in its wake would last for centuries to come. Outside, night fell completely, and the city lights came on like stars. Inside, Keira and Theron remained exactly where they belonged together, surrounded by truth and beauty and the infinite possibilities of forever.